Model Making Guru is sponsored by emodels.co.uk. Make something awesome. Hey everyone, it's Foxx from modelmaking.guru here. Hello and welcome to the first proper episode in my build series of the Bandai Perfect Grade 1/72 scale Millennium Falcon Flying Hamburger. Welcome. This is of course my build for my very good friends and channel sponsors at emodels.co.uk, your one-stop shop for all your model making needs. Okay, so before we get going, allow me to explain the basic plan, because in the last video I did an unboxing of the plan and kind of forgot to say anything about the plan. The basic plan is I'm going to build and paint this up as best I can. Now, it is a Bandai kit, it's a push-fit kit, and therefore it's not a highly skilled build because it's push-fit together. Everything will go together beautifully. It's wonderfully engineered. I don't expect to have many problems. All that being said, of course, for the build we are going to need a certain amount of tools and equipment, so in a second I'll go through, but basically we're just going to quickly whiz through, get the thing built, and then the real fun starts with the painting. Now, I do plan on doing as many sort of sub-assemblies as I can at first before we do the painting. I'm not going to paint stuff on the sprue, and I don't want a billion parts on sticks to paint. What I'm going to be doing is putting stuff together in sub-assemblies. Now, if this was a fine mould Millennium Falcon kit that's a glue kit, I'd know exactly how I was going to do it. I build everything and paint it. This is a bit different. I've had a quick look through, and I know there's certain things I can pre-assemble, such as, you know, the mandibles here. I can pre-assemble each of those and just completely, and then I can paint them. The upper and lower holes, not fully sure, because I don't want to be manhandling them with all the little delicate parts on them and risk breaking anything off on those. So we'll see how that goes as we go along, but the idea is to get everything built up into sub-assemblies, then we'll do the painting, and then it'll be finished. So before we get going, let's have a quick look at some of the tools we might need. Now, we're not going to need a lot of tools. Like I say, this is a push-fit build and it's Bandai, so we're not going to have to rely on a lot of filling and sanding and seam repairs and things like that. Very little of that. So the tools list is quite small, although I'm sure we'll probably add some as we go along. First of all, we're going to need something to get the parts off the sprues. Now, I've got here a couple of pairs of nippers. I've got a pair of God hand nippers and a pair of Tamiya side cutters. Now, most likely, you will have a pair of these or something very similar. These on their own are absolutely fine. Don't worry about these so much. These on their own are absolutely fine. Any kind of nippers. I would suggest to go for model making specific nippers, not just a pair of wire cutters from the DIY drawer downstairs. Cutters are designed to be as gentle as possible to the plastic and not cause lots of pulling and tearing and squishing and ripping and so try and get some model making nippers. There's Tamiya ones, there's Ammo ones, there's AK, there's loads of different brands. You'll be absolutely fine as long as they're model making ones. Will be nice and delicate. I do have a pair of God hand nippers. You can, if you've got some of these are brilliant, and we'll explain why I've got two as we go along. But don't worry if you can't get any of these. If you're in the UK like me, these are like hen's teeth. They're incredibly expensive and they're incredibly hard to get. My good friends at eModels don't actually stock these. There's nowhere in the UK you can get them. I was sent these as a gift. But if you have got a pair of these, if you're outside the UK, especially if you're in the Asian territories and you've got some of these where it's easy access, get some of these. They are brilliant. So you'll need some nippers. Next up, we have our Stabity device. This is my Swan Morton No. 3 scalpel with a fresh blade. It's very important when you start a new project, always replace your blade. If you've got a knife where you can take the blade off and replace it, that's the best kind of modelling knife to have, either a modelling knife or in this case it's a surgical scalpel. It's a medical scalpel, but it's absolutely fine. You want something where you can remove and replace the blade as much as possible, because you will go through a lot of blades. For most builds I'd start with a fresh blade and it'd do me fine until the next build. For this one, because there's so many parts, I'll probably go through a couple of blades if not more. But yeah, get yourself a nice sharp either model making blade or in this case a surgical scalpel, and lots of packs of blades. Next up, we have some lovely tweezers. These are my delicious God hand tweezers that were sent to me by my friend Kenneth in Australia. But have yourself a few sets of tweezers. There's all different shapes and sizes. I do recommend that you have a pair with nice fine pointy tips. Have a pair with sort of flat, broader tips for picking up larger objects and different shapes. And if you can get yourself a pair with the the 90-degree corner at the end. They're quite handy. There are a couple of the master tool sets available on the eModels website, and lots of other makes and brands. There's tons and tools of tweezers, so go and check them out. Get yourself a goodly selection, because the thin pointy ones aren't always the best shape for certain things, and sometimes the big flat ones are a bit big and bulky to get into small corners, so get yourself a good collection of the tweezers. Next up, you'll want some kind of sanding solution. I've just got here some sanding sticks, but you don't have to have sanding, well, these are sanding sponges and sticks. You don't have to have sanding sponges and sticks. You can mix and match. Some people prefer to use just sandpaper. I prefer to use sanding sponges because they're kind of squishy and they conform to, if you try and sand something, they'll conform to the shape a bit better than just pure sandpaper. But a selection of sponges and sanding sticks, you can make your own. You can put sandpaper over, say, lolly sticks, things like that. But all you need to do is make sure that you have a good selection of sponges. These are the Ultimate Modelling Products ones. You can get them from eModels. All different shapes and sizes. You want a good range from a rough grit. Now, the thing is with the Ultimate ones, I don't know what the grits are because they don't print them on the sanding sponges. But that's rough. You can hear that, and these are quite fine. I'm going to guess this is maybe, I don't know, this could be 300 grit, maybe 400 grit, I don't know, maybe 1200 grit. This could be 2,000 or 3,000 grit. Whenever you sand, and we'll go through this, whenever you sand, you go from the roughest to the smoothest to get the best finish possible. So have yourself a good collection of sanding sticks or sponges, and along that note, if you've got some, get yourself some very fine metal files as well. You might not need these, but they do come in handy. Not like big hardcore files that your dad might have in the garage, anything like that. They're a bit too harsh. But especially modelling files, you'll see them in store. Modelling files, model making files, very fine craft needle files. These can be quite handy for certain jobs, so have some of them to hand. Doesn't matter if you haven't got them, because this will do the same job, but this might just save your skin in a few places, especially on very thin pipes, of which we... Now, last of all, we have two tools which are completely optional, but really, really handy. First of all, we have a scribing tool. Now, this is the Tamiya Mark II scriber. This is ideal for wherever you have... You see, like here, you've got on the grip here, you've got these recessed little grooves there. Now there's a seam line that goes down the middle. Ironically, there's a seam line that goes down the middle of the scribing tool, or a mould line. You can use this tool, which I'll talk about in a second, to get rid of that mould line, but you can't use it to get into all these gaps. This is where a scribing tool will come in handy. We won't need this to scribe any panel lines. These are usually, you use this to scribe panel lines into the plastic if you've sanded them away. We're actually going to use this, if we need it, to remove any mould lines that go into any recessed or grilled details. We might not need it, I don't know yet, but we shall find out. So I would recommend, it comes in handy anyway, but I would recommend a scribing tool of some sort. And last of all, we have a mould line removal tool. This is the Citadel one, but there's lots of other different ones available. This is basically just a big, thick, not particularly flexible metal blade that's designed for getting rid of those mould lines there. You can see they're designed just for that, and they're also good for getting rid of some uneven step finishes. You don't have to use one of these. You can just use your modelling knife if you want to, but the advantage this has is, because the blade isn't flexible, it's not going to leave scratches and skitter across the surface and leave scratches and marks. So it's a bit of a neater solution than just using your blade, but you don't need one of these. You don't need either of these, but if you can get them, it's really good. So those are the tools we need. We probably will need a few more as we go along. I do recommend having just some little tins, pots, things like this. We're going to need some of these. So I've got a big collection of pots and tins. That's very nice German chocolate. Pots and tins and just things for storing parts in, because we're going to have lots and lots of tiny parts to deal with. And as you're working on, say, a subsection, you might have 20 little parts. Have a little top of a... This is the top of a cotton bud container, or, you know, you've got a brush cleaning soap container, anything you've got, or plates or bowls where you can store little parts temporarily. If you can get a tin with a lid, even better, because then it's safe and secure. Then you can put the bits in, and then when the cat comes in the room and jumps on your workbench, you're not going to lose all the parts to the carpet monster, because the cat's battered them off the top of the desk. In other news, don't let the cat in the model making room. And last of all, we probably will need some glue. Now this, like I said, it is a Bandai kit. It's a push fit kit. You don't need to glue any of it. However, we probably will do, because this is being built for eModels and it's got to go back to them to go into their display cabinet. I'm going to need to transport it around. I don't want little bits falling off. So we are going to use some glues here and there, either for sticking little tiny parts on, or even for filling a few gaps here and there. I don't know yet. Now I'm going to use 2 glues, possibly 3, but I'll use these 2 for now. I've got Tamiya Extra Thin and Tamiya, the regular Tamiya cement. This is fat and gloopy. We might not need it, but it's fat and gloopy, and it's good for sticking things together that need to stick together quite quickly. It's good for load bearing corners and surfaces because it's got some stick to it. Tamiya Extra Thin is a welding cement. This is as well, but not as much. This is a welding cement. It melts plastic, it melts polystyrene, and it melts the plastic together. So if you've got 2 pieces of plastic and you put them together like that and they're push fit, they'll come apart. If you put this in there, it very slightly melts the plastic. So what were 2 pieces of plastic now become 1 single piece, and you can't pull it apart without breaking it. So it's one of the strongest bonds you're going to get with polystyrene based plastic. So we're going to use some Tamiya Extra Thin and some regular Tamiya fat. You'll hear me call it fat, but it's fat and thin. And I think that's just about everything. What I'll do, if I come across anything else I might need as we go along, I will show you, and we'll say, oh, I forgot, I didn't know about this, or here's an extra product I think you might need. So I'll do that as we go along. So what I shall do, without further delay, I shall stop talking. I shall stop tidying my desk and being... I'll stop doing that. I'll go and get everything ready, and we'll actually make a start. Well, I'll show you quickly first some things in the instructions, and then we'll make a start. Back in a moment. Okay, so really quickly, something I want to show you in the instruction manual, and something I've just spotted as well. So there's another tool I need to show you. When you get to each new page, before you start the building, come down to the bottom of the page and have a look. You'll see down here a load of symbols. Now these are all symbols that are specific and unique to Bandai kits. If you're familiar with them, you'll recognise them and you know what they mean. But if you've never built a Bandai kit before, you won't have a clue. This gives you a quick look at the bottom of the page as to what specific instructions or call-outs or warnings are on that specific page. So these symbols here relate purely to this page, and you'll get to learn them. There are things like do this bit first, do the parts in this order, don't cut this bit off, glue here, pay attention, things like that. And I'll call these out as we go through. But before you do anything, come down to the bottom of the page and have a quick gander, because it will tell you what warnings and callouts will be on that page. Now another thing I've just noticed, from everything I've seen about this kit, and like I said at the start, it's a no glue kit, and Bandai push fit kits don't need glue. But there is some photo etch on this kit, and I thought, and from everything I'd seen, you wouldn't need any glue for it. However, it turns out you're going to need a tiny bit of glue. You can see here, there's a little symbol, little brushy symbol here. It appears here when we're putting a grill on the cockpit part, and it also appears on this page that I've handily marked. Here, when we're putting the grills on the engine at the back, on the exhausts, got it there again. Now I hadn't expected that, and I hadn't realised we were going to need some glue, because as far as I knew, all these parts and photo etch pieces were held in place by plastic components, but I guess they're not, or if they are, these are just like reinforcing it with glue. So it doesn't tell you anywhere in the instructions what kind of glue to use. It just assumes you know what to do. However, you might not. If you're putting photo etch onto plastic, you can't use your Tamiya thin or your Tamiya thick. That melts plastic. There's no plastic in metal. So you're going to need some CA glue, or super glue, or cyanoacrylate glue, basically. CA glue. And I've got here some thin CA. Other brands are available, plenty in stock at eModels. We're going to be using some thin CA glue. Now you don't have to use thin CA glue. I just quite like it for what I'm going to be using it for. I quite like it because it dries quite quickly and we can control it. But I'm going to be using thin. If you've got thin CA glue, you want to try and get yourself a filament applicator. I don't really know what they're called. It's a little nozzle that you put on the end, and it takes it to like a hair width applicator, so you can get a tiny amount of glue if you're using thin. If you're using a thick CA glue or a medium CA glue, you can just use some glue on a cocktail stick instead. But if you've got the thin stuff, see if you can get some of the sort of hair thin, hair fine applicators as well. But I'll go into more detail on that when we get to that stage. But yes, we're going to be using some thin CA glue. So anyway, enough nonsense. That's that bit. Let's get on with some building. We'll do a quick demonstration. I say we, I don't know why I keep saying we, it's me doing it on camera. I will do a quick demonstration of how to get parts off the sprue, and then we can assemble something. Wow, I take forever to get anywhere. Back in a moment. Right, so let's make a start with the cockpit. Now, if you've not seen one of my videos before, I do tend to angle them towards the absolute starter, so I will go through things that I know many of you will be like, why are you explaining how to do this? It's really obvious. But I like to assume that some people who are watching this may be absolute beginners. They've not seen any of my other stuff and they've never made a model before, so I can't make that assumption that they know what they're doing. So I'm going to cover some obvious stuff, and I'm going to quickly look at getting things off the sprues. Now, you might think it's obvious, but it's not, and this is why we need all our nippers and cutters. Some people will just take parts off the sprues with a modelling knife. You can do that. It's damaging to the blade. It's a lot of hassle and effort trying to cut them off, and you can damage very delicate parts, and there's a lot of parts in this kit that are really delicate and you can't afford to be going in hacking around with a knife. You want to get your nippers. Now remember, I'm using 2 pairs. I've got my nice expensive God hands and I've got my Tamiya side cutters. Here's what we're going to do. This is the part, this is the tree or the sprue, and these are the gates where the part attaches to the sprue. This is how it comes out of the injection moulding machine. You want to get it off now. Now the compulsion is just to get the nippers in there and cut away at the piece. Don't do that. Don't do that. What you want to do is get your the heavy, if you've got 2 pairs of nippers. If you haven't got 2 pairs of nippers, don't worry, just use whatever nippers you've got. I've got 2. I'm going to use these heavy duty ones to get the piece off, and then I'm going to use these to clean up. But if you've only got 1 pair, don't panic. The first thing you want to do is to get the part off the sprue is not cut right against the part. No matter how good your nippers, unless they're really expensive, they're going to mangle the plastic a bit. They're going to cause stress and tearing damage. So if you go right up to the part and snip, you could take a chunk out of the part, and you don't want that. So what you're going to do is get your cutters, get the flat edge of the cutter facing towards the model part, and just snip away, but leave a couple of millimeters just of the gate, so you're not actually cutting into the part itself. There we go. So there's one more here, and this is why you want your heavy duty cutters, because if I use these, my God hands on those, that would have shattered the blade by now, because they're not designed for such heavy duty things. So you can see there we've got the part here. We've got these big, huge nub time. So we want to get rid of these, but we don't want to damage the piece underneath. We want to make it look like it was never attached. Now this is where I'm going to go in with the God hands. And what I'm going to do, because these are such exquisitely fine blades, I can actually go right up to the plastic like this and snip. And I've still got work to do, but because they cut very delicately, the blades, they don't pull the plastic, they just cut through it. So there's very little stress and damage to the plastic. So I can afford to go right up close. However, with the Tamiya nippers, if I use those, yeah, I'd be mangling this plastic to shreds. So I don't want to do that. So again, I can go in here. I'm making sure whenever you do use nippers, even if they're just bog standard cheap nippers, try to avoid cutting from the tip. Cut from the middle or the bottom of the blades, because the tips are the thinnest, weakest part, and you might damage them. So I'll just go in and I will snip like that. We'll get rid of these big nubs. Right, get rid of those. Okay, so we've got those off, so we just need to clean up. Now you can see here, let's find one. Now I don't know if you'll see this because it's white plastic on a light background. Where's that nub? I can't remember where I took the nub from now. It's such a good cut. Where is it? I've got to find it now. There we go. There's a nub here. I don't know if you'll see it, but there's a nub here. I can move in closer now because I've got a special focus on my phone. There's a nub here. We need to get rid of this. Now it's on a slightly curved surface, and I don't much want to go in with a sanding stick or a file and just hack away at it with that, because that will just flatten that surface, and I need to keep that curve. So you can, if you want to, I'm going to go a little bit more advanced than normal. You can, if you want to, just go in with a sanding sponge and sand that away. I tend to do a little extra bit of work though. I want to make it as small as possible, so if there's a little bit of a nub left, I'll go in with my modelling knife. And you can do this with, if you don't have the God hand nippers or a very fine pair of nippers, you can do this stage after getting it off the sprue if you want. I tend to go with my blade, and I will follow the curve, and I will basically gently shave that nub off. Now I'm doing this towards myself, but I'm an idiot, and I've been doing this for 40 years. Don't do it towards yourself. I can't for the life of me work away from myself, so this is how I have to do it. But if you're a younger builder, maybe get someone else to do this bit. Now I'm going to brace my thumbs together so I don't slip. And all I'm going to do is gently keep this flat with the surface, and just very gently, I don't know if you'll see this, you haven't shot, very gently I'm just going to shave that way. I'm not digging into the plastic, I'm not putting on any pressure, I'm just shaving it away slowly, just to get that as smooth as I can, so I can minimise the sanding. There we go. Yes, I want to keep the sanding to a minimum. Now, with this grey, light grey or white plastic with the Bandai stuff, it's quite forgiving because when you stress the plastic, it stays the same colour. If this was black plastic and you did all this, you might have white stress marks. But this light colour plastic is a joy because you can file this. So, because the file's quite small, I can go in and very, very gently, really, I mean, I can't stress how gentle this is, really, really gently, I'm just going to start filing that a little bit, just to kind of get rid of it even more. But I'm putting no pressure on at all, and I'm only going in one direction. This is the important bit. You want to avoid lots of nasty filing marks. So always go in one direction, and I'm curving the blade. I'm following the curve here, because I don't want to carve a flat spot. Literally, I'm just using the weight of the file. There we go. So that's now a little bit rough, so I can go in with a sanding sponge. And this is a medium, I don't know what grade this is. And I'm just going to, again, in one direction, very gently, try and smooth that down. Now, I'm not sanding away the nub at this point. The nub is pretty much gone. At this point, I'm sanding away any little marks left by the file and any little scratches I may have put in with the blade. And I'm again going in one direction. I'm following the curve of the part. I'm going to hold it up to the light. You can't see, but I'm holding it up to the light to see how that looks. And that looks a little bit rough. It's a little bit scratchy. So I'm just going to bit more of that. I'm going to go in with a slightly rougher grade. I've got some sort of visible file marks there. So I'm going to go with the rougher grade and just try and smooth those out. I'm being very, very gentle. Again, this is almost no pressure. Now, when you're sanding marks away, you can go in more than one direction, but very carefully, because you're trying to smooth away any rough spots that the sanding's made. So little circular motions like this are quite handy sometimes. It's like a scratch on your windscreen in your car. If you get a scratch on your windscreen, it looks like a scratch. If you get a billion scratches on your windscreen and they're all crossing over each other, it just looks frosted. That's the effect we want. We want to hide the scratches by just covering them in a billion other scratches. So it just looks more like a texture than a scratch. So that's been done. Then we'll go back with the sponge. Let me get a slightly rough one. There we go. We'll just do that, and we're just aiming to get rid of any obvious sanding marks and the nub. Now, if you're a Gunpla builder and you're not painting your Gunpla, you'd go further than this. You'd do polishing as well with very fine polishing sticks, because you'd want to get rid of any texture. You want it to look like bare plastic. But because we're going to be painting this, it doesn't matter what it looks like in terms of if you can see it's not as shiny as the rest of the model. I don't care. It's going to get covered in primer. So all I care about right now, I'm going to hold it up to the light, is there a nub? And can I see obvious sanding marks? And I cannot. Really? There's a very slight sanding mark there. Now you won't see on camera here, but there is a very slight sanding texture. But I know just from experience that that is so fine that the primer is going to hide that completely. So that is how you get bits off the sprue and clean them up. So I'm going to go around and get all this cleared up. I've got all these parts out so far. I've not got all the parts off for the cockpit because some of them are tiny and I'll forget which is which. And what I'm going to do, I have a plan now. I'm going to basically get everything built before we do any painting. So I'm going to assemble the cockpit and the cockpit tube, but there are some bits I can't do because like the photo etch that goes here, I can't attach that and glue it yet because I need to take all this apart again to paint the cockpit later on. But I want to get everything built and assembled first. So I'll go and get all these bits cleaned off, and then we'll do some sort of assembly that we might need to take apart again later. It's the beauty of a push fit kit. You can take it apart again later. Back in a moment. I can't see the other nubs now. I don't know where they were. There's one. Okay, so this pile of shenanigans here is all the interior parts for the cockpit interior. Now, like I said, keep in mind, we're going to put all this together, then a lot of it we're going to take apart again. So we're not going to do any painting right now, we're just going to roughly put things together. So what we're going to do, get people in their seats first, and I'm going to have, I think, obviously in the pilot seats, it's got to be Han in his left-hand chair, or right-hand chair, depending on your point of view. Get in there. So Han can go in there. I'm just going to put him in loosely because he's a devil to get out. And of course Chewie. Get in, Chewie. There we go. So that's them two in their seats. Now I know his feet look kind of weird on Han. Look at that. It's kind of weird, isn't it? Yeah, Bandai, bless them, when they're at this kind of size, they're not the best at figures, but you're not going to see that anyway. It doesn't really matter. So Han and Chewie, and then we have the back seats, which are ejector seats from a fighter plane that I forget which fighter plane it was, but they are real life ejector seats. These were Porsche seats, if I remember on the physical set. These were Porsche seats, I should say, not Porsche, it's Porsche seats. And these were ejector seats from a plane, which I'll probably put in a caption down here somewhere because I'll remember afterwards. So in the back seats, we're going to have C-3PO and Luke the Farm Boy, Lukeness. Yeah, I like putting 3PO in because 3PO is just great. It's a nice little... The cockpit is going to be dark. Although there's a lighting in this kit, it is a lit kit, the cockpit is going to be dark. So he'd be a nice little bright spot. Plus it's easy to paint anyway. So there's those two front and back seats. We have the dashboard and Gefahrt. Now I'm going to do my space helmet of seeing for this because these are tiny. We have the two yokes. I've got a yoke for you. Shut up. Yes, two yokes are going to go in here. Now we're going to glue these. No, we're not going to glue these in. We're just going to push them in place. So they need to go a very certain way, up like that. So it's just a case of putting the peg into the hole. I say it's just a case. As with most things, they're so small, it's not that easy. Get in, ooh. I could use tweezers at this point, but if I use tweezers, it's asking for things to ping off into the carpet of doom. Yes, because nothing comes back from the carpet of doom. There we go, that's going to go in there. Now I don't want to glue these in right away because for all I know, let's have a look at the instructions. It might be that once these are in, you can't actually get the figures in, so I don't want to make that assumption right now. Oh no, I could glue those in. I can glue those in because there's tons of room. So let's get them pushed in all the way. Oh, bent one. There you go. Knit one, purl one, bend one. Careful now. Get those pushed in without bending them too much. There we go. Be careful of those. I'm not concerned about being able to paint them because that'll be quite easy to paint. So, a little bit of Tamiya extra thin. Remember, we're using Tamiya extra thin for this. It's what we call a caterpillar action cement or capillary action, which means it's so thin I can put the parts together first and then just touch the glue to them. And that glue will suck down into the gap, and that's all I need. Now, you don't have to glue these. I'm just gluing these because I want to make sure nothing comes out ever. Because once this is finished, it's going off to remodels to sit in their cabinet. The last thing I want is for something in the cockpit to fall off and I can't get to it. Now, I'm not going to glue these bits together because, of course, if I glue the console to the seats, I'll never ever get the figures in because they have to sit on. So I'm just putting that together loosely for now. When it comes to painting this, we'll probably won't actually, because it's a nice firm grip and I need to get the figures in. So this is part of this project because it's a push fit kit. This is where this project is brilliant, and I will finish a sentence at some point without dumping out halfway through. Because it's a push fit kit, we have a certain freedom to pull things apart halfway through, so we can change our plan. So a lot of this is I'm building and planning things. So I'm looking at this and thinking, how am I going to paint this? Well, I'm going to airbrush the basic base colours and then dry brush some colours on top, and I can brush paint the control yokes. But do I put the figures in first? No, I can't. I've got to paint the figures separately. I don't want to paint the figures in the chair, so I've got to paint the figure separately and then put the figure in the chair. However, I can't get the figure in the chair when the chair is assembled and attached to the console because I couldn't get the figure in there. So I'm planning ahead. So if you see me going off on tangents and like talking about what I'm going to do and maybe I'm going to do this or that, that's because always you want to be planning and considering your options and thinking ahead in sub-assemblies. When this whole build is done and we're ready to start the painting, we're going to have basically, I think, the upper hull, the lower hull, the cockpit and the interior. And the first thing we're going to paint is interior, and when that's done we can then paint the rest of the ship. So you'll see some sub-assemblies, but not many. That's there. Now we want to get these parts together. Now here's a handy tip for you. This is a push fit kit, like I said, and like a push fit kit, it means you can put it together and take it apart again. However, you will find that Bandai kits, if you've never made one, they are beautifully engineered to go together fantastically and grip like a leech. So where you've got things like a peg here and a hole here, once you put that together, you might get it apart, or you might just as easily snap that peg off. So here's a handy tip. If you want to be able to easily take things apart again, because we will glue this later on, when you get a peg, I'll demonstrate on a bigger piece of sprue just so you can actually physically see what I mean. What you want to do, I'll just get a piece of sprue off for you. What you want to do is cut the tip of the pegs off. So imagine this is the peg that's going into a hole. So this here represents that peg there. And imagine that's going into this hole on this side. If I jam these together, that peg will be like, it won't want to come apart. It'll be like, no, 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 gripping like a leech, not going anywhere. What you can do is if you get your peg and you just snip the end off, 45 degrees like that, then when you attach the parts together, there's a little less surface area and a little less friction, and it will be easier to take apart. Now, if you're just going to build this and not have to take it apart, you don't need to worry about that. But because I want to get this cockpit apart later on and paint it, I need to make sure I can take it apart. And this is a handy tip from the world of Gunpla. I'm not going to use these for that because these are tiny little pegs. So I am going to use my God hand nippers. If you've got some nice Zurons or something like that, remember you can't get these in the UK easily, you can use those. Don't use your heavy duty ones because it'll just destroy the peg altogether. And I've got to be very careful because I don't want to break my nippers and I don't want to take too much of the peg off either. So let's just try and get a little tiny. There you go, and that one. There we go. Now it does mean that this thing might fall apart at a moment's notice, but that's fine because I want to be able to take it apart again. That's the whole point. But I can, if I need to, because I've got the option of it, I can glue them together. We will attach these two together like this, you'll see, with the fumbling and the dropping. That'll be good. So that I can see now they go together. It's still quite a tight fit, but I know that I can get those two easily apart now. If I'd just left those pegs as they were, I'd have to get my spudger tool out and everything to get them apart. In fact, I've already done it before and it's like, oh. So those go there. Now you see they don't fit together brilliantly. Doesn't matter. That's not a problem right now. We'll get those two together. So that's the cockpit bucket. This then needs to sit down on top. Now if you've not built a Bandai kit before, if you've never had that pleasure, I can't see actually what I'm doing. I've got to get this box. What have I got to get on here now? This needs to go, oops, knocking the camera, my apologies. This needs to sit on there. There's a little sort of tab, there's a slot here, and there's a set of tabs in there, so it's a bit fiddly. Yeah, if you've never had the experience and the joy of a Bandai kit before, trust me, you are missing out big time. Let's see if we can get this in. They can be a little fiddly to build, but they're not hard, they're not complicated. There's no real skill in building one of these kits. They just, ooh, and that didn't work. Let's try that again, shall we? Actually, did we snap a peg then? No, we didn't. Good. Thought for a moment, then we snapped a peg. Whoa. They do go together. Here's me saying they go together brilliantly. If you've never built one, then I'm struggling to get it together. They do fit together perfectly. It's just they can be quite fiddly. But there's no real skill involved in these kits. It's making me a liar now, isn't it? Do you know, I'm trying to do the good PR here for Bandai. There we go. No, it's not really that hard. Yes, although sometimes some of the bits can be a little fiddly like that because it's dark and I can't see, they do go together beautifully. So you could build this thing with no glue at all and it will just work. Now the back wall of this is clear, as you'll see, because there is lighting. Now there is going to be a modification I need to do to this because although this is a lit cockpit, unfortunately it's not a brilliantly lit cockpit, as in technologically it's not brilliantly lit. I don't mean brilliant as in a bright light, I mean brilliant as in they've not done a very good job of figuring out how the lighting is going to work. So the back wall is clear because it's supposed to allow the lights to shine through. However, the way they've designed the fitting of the lights, the way the lights are fitted in, doesn't really make any sense in terms of allowing light to come through. Why is this one not going in? Having some issues with this. It's because that is actually solid. That's a hole, and that one isn't. That's a hole. That's very strange. Just see if I can cut through it. Is it just... How very bizarre. It's got a skin of plastic over it. That explains it. How very strange. My files are too large to go through, but for some reason this hole had a skin of plastic over it. Oh, well, that explains. See, it wasn't me. That's the first time in my entire life I've ever come across anything like that on a Bandai kit. That's very strange. Right, let me go and clear that out and then we'll get that assembled. Right, sorry about that. That was fun. Yes, that was very, very weird. I had to clean out that socket because that socket just was completely like solid. It was like a thin film of plastic, so I had to kind of scrape it out with the knife blade. And I sanded both the little lugs down just a little bit because it was really tight fit and I was having trouble getting this panel back off again. Now it is still a tight fit, but I can push it from that side when I need to take it apart. Anyway, like I was saying, the whole point of this clear wall is there's going to be light coming from behind and we're going to paint it and then either drill some holes or scrape some paint away for some of the light to shine through from the back wall to suggest all the lights and stuff on the wall. Now you do get water slide decals for all the cockpit details. I've had a think about it. I'm not going to be using them because there's no way you can apply water slide decals to these rough lumpy surfaces. You can see like the control panel on the dashboard there, on the console and on the walls. Decals wouldn't work. They just wouldn't work. Decals need a reasonably flat surface. So if I was going to use the water slides, I'd have to sand all those surfaces down. I don't want to do that. There's lots of nice detail on there. So we're going to paint the interior anyway. And it is going to be dark, but we'll get there. So yes, you might need to... I don't suspect you'll have that issue that I had, but if it doesn't fit very well, I just sanded down, scraped down a bit of these nubs on either side. Just take them from this shape to that shape and sand a bit of the edge away just to make it fit. Right, what's next? Next we have to do a bit of bodging. Now, talking about the lighting, we have to do a bodge because how this works, the cockpit goes in here like this. You see, like that, you see? And the lights sit in here. Now, the problem is, there's this great big wall of plastic here. So when the lights sit in here, they'll point up, and the only thing they'll illuminate is these two little slots of plastic, these two tabs here. The idea is they hit these two, and if you haven't painted them over, those are the bits that glow like a light. But you've got all the other lights. The whole point is you want to light the cockpit, not just have two strips of light at the back. So we're going to basically massacre this. The other thing we need to do is that the lights sit in... I'm not going to install the lighting now, but the lights sit in these two little plastic bits here. And the wiring goes in, the bulbs go in, and this sits on the back to cover them up. And they've got this tiny, tiny little hole, this tiny little pinprick of a hole. Not even that. I want the bulbs to be glowing bright as the sun, so it can shine through here and whatever we've painted and shine through all the little holes we'll drill and little bits we scrape off to make lots of nice bright lights, because there's going to be no lights on the walls. It's just going to be at the back wall. So yeah, this is nonsense. So what we're going to do, we're going to take some old crappy cutters. Now we're not going to use our nice expensive ones. In fact, even those are too small. Let's go for it. These aren't crappy ones, but they're heavy duty. These are my Citadel cutters. We need to get rid of all of this, because this doesn't actually serve a purpose. Once this is in, that wall doesn't really serve too much of a purpose. We're going to leave this middle bit. We're just going to take away these two pieces here. So the first thing I'm going to do is just literally hack away at this. So that, and a bit of that. It always feels quite bad to be doing this to 300 quid's worth of kit, but hey. What can you do? So there you go, cut that down, and we'll cut this one down as well. We're not going through any of the structural elements, just this little bit of plastic. There we go. We can snap that down. It's not a supporting wall, it's not anything that anything attaches to, it's just this little bit here. So we can snap that back. Doesn't need to be pretty because we're never going to see it. I might give it a quick zizz with the sander just to make sure there's nothing sticking out, getting in the way. So that's now going to go on there. And the beauty of this now is that, as you can see here, the light will now shine into the recessed bits down there. It's not just going to be these two sort of flat tab things. You're going to have lights coming all the way through. Yes, you've got the solid bit in the middle, which is a bit of a shame. But I'm going to get maybe the top of the light on the door. And that's about all I need. So that's gonna sort that out. And for these, what I'll need to do, I'll just need to, like I was before, get my knife. I've got a drill actually. I'll get my pin vise out. Welcome to my drawer of many things. Might get my pin vise out. I'll do that now. to save myself some work, I'll get my pin vise. And we'll get, I won't use that pin vise, I'll use my other pin vise. Welcome to my drawer of many things. My other pin vise, which can take a big fat bit. I like a nice big fat bit. Now there you go, there's a nice big fat drill hole. I don't need to clean it out completely, but I want to make it a bit wider. So we'll get our big fat drill bit and our big fat chuck. Hey up chuck, hey up chuck. How are you all? I hope you're all well while I'm doing this. Hope everybody's well and having fun. Not great times at the moment, of course, we're all stuck indoors. But hopefully this finds you in good humours and good spirits. And having a jolly good time. And a project like this, with a bajillion parts, yeah, a good thing for the situation right now when we can't really go anywhere and do anything. So for this, all we're going to do, dead simple, going to get the drill bit, and I'm going to get it in the centre there, and I'm just going to drill that out. Again, this does not need to be neat. All I'm doing is widening the hole so the bulb can shine more light out. Now this is sticking a bit because this drill bit's not very good. There we go. Well, this pin vise is not very good. You could just widen this with the knife blade if you wanted to. I was going to do that first, but I forgot I had a pin vise. Yeah, so that's through there. Now if I had a bigger bit, of course I could make a bigger hole. And what I might do is just make that a bit bigger. So that's the biggest drill bit I've got basically. So what I can do if I want to, again, if you're doing this, be very careful, is widen this with my knife blade. After you've done this and widen these holes, I would recommend that you replace your knife blade if you've got a replaceable blade like on this one. If you don't, if you're just using a modelling knife, I can't recommend enough these Swan Morton blades. We've got them in store at emodels.co.uk, who I'm making this video for. They've got these and packs of blades and stuff. So do go and check them out. 10 blades will last you a project like this nicely, no problem. But again, if you're a younger builder, do get someone to help you out with this bit. I'm known as Captain Stabberty for obvious reasons, but I'm also almost 50 years old and I've been doing this for a long time. So although I'm known as Captain Stabberty, I don't actually do Stabberty on myself that often. It's not often that happens. Right, so that should probably be enough. We can adjust it if we need to. We'll do some lighting tests before we start all the painting up and stuff. But we can always widen these. These bits aren't going to get painted anyway because they're purely structural and internal. So there we go. So now we're not going to have a little pinprick of light, and we're not going to have just those little top bars covered in light. We're going to have the whole back wall with light pouring through it. And it might not work. It might be a complete disaster. But this will now sit in here like that. And again, it's another fiddly bit that you have to have 15 pairs of hands. That would sit in there thusly. Let me get the tweezers. Where's my tweezers? Let's do it properly, Foxx. That would sit in. I'm not going to push it all the way because once it's in, it won't come out again. You see, that sits in there, and the bulbs face upwards at an angle, about 45 degrees. That little tiny pinhole was nothing. So now what we'll have is we'll have the LED bulbs in there with all the light in the universe coming out of them and illuminating the whole back wall. And that'll be much better. Now you would normally at this point, if you're just building it, you put the wiring and lighting in here, but I'm going to leave that till later on, because we're going to get the cockpit and stuff painted. So that sits in there. Now it does actually, does it lock into there? There's a square tab here, and there's a square hole here, and the twain shall meet, I think. Again, I don't want to be too violent and aggressive, because I don't want things to go in and never come out again. This will sit on top. Now I have tried to put this on and take it off before, and it's a hell of a job getting this on and off again. So yeah, do take your time, but be careful. Don't push it in too firmly or too far, because once it's on, you might have trouble getting it off again. So that will sit on there, like that. We'll see. Where's it going now? Makes no sense. I'm not even looking at the bits that go in where. There we go. I think. Do we? No. Yes, there we go. There's like a tongue here that goes over the top. Like there to see. And it fits together around nicely. Now there is, I have to say, there is a bit of a gap here. Bit of a gap, you see. And there is a bit of a gap here. Now this gap here just looks like a panel line between these panels. So that, don't care about that, that's fine. This one, and this one, I can't remember if that's supposed to be on the actual real thing or not. So these two we might have to sort out later on when it comes to getting the final building and painting done. We'll get the cockpit painted, get all this assembled, and then perhaps do some sort of filler on here. Now when you put the canopy frame over the top as well, again there is a bit of a gap. Now I'm going to be gluing this in, so that's fine. That's going to be fine when it's glued in, and that, yeah, there's a slight gap, but it's not the end of the world. Once it's all glued in place, it'll probably be fine. But I'm not sure yet. We'll have to think about this when it comes to nearer the time. But yes, there's definitely a gap there. You could put a greeble on there if you weren't worried about accuracy, or we could fill it. I'm not sure yet. Anyway, that's the tube part. So we've got some other bits to do. We have to add these 3 parts here. Now, if you are doing like me, you're assembling and then going to take it all apart again, I do recommend, it's a common sense thing. Some of these parts all look very similar. And if you look in the instructions here, it does say that you have to be specific. These 3 parts, this one, 17, has a big gap here and a small gap there. So you need to know which is which. So all I've done is on the inside of each one, I've marked the part number. So that's number 17. That's number, whatever that is, I can't read it. And that's number 19. So that's obviously number 18. So it's worth, when you're doing this kind of assembly and disassembly, especially if you're doing Gunpla and things like this, if it's got a lot of parts and they're all very similar, it is worth just marking down on the part somewhere that you're not going to see it. So we need 18 first, which is this one. No, that one. Which is that shape. That goes under here. Now these are the parts we're going to use if you're using, these are the ones you need to use if you're doing the photo etch part. There are 2 options. There's the photo etch grill that goes along here, or there's just a solid plastic grill. We're using the photo etch, so I want 17, and remember 17 says big gap, little gap, big gap, little gap, cardboard box. Sorry, couldn't resist. So we want big gap at the bottom there. You can see that big gap and little gap there. Big gap, little, and then drop it. So I have to do it all again. Big gap, little gap, cardboard box. Yes, if you're not doing the photo etch, if you get the non-premium version of this kit, you can use the solid parts instead, which just simulate the same thing as the photo etch. So this is a bit of a tight fit. If I seem like I'm being really cautious and careful and a bit fiddly with the parts, it's because I am. Because again, I don't want to jam something in that's never going to come apart, because that would be sadness. And 19, same again, you want the big gap at the bottom, so big gap there, do it on camera, big gap there, little gap at the top, which, yes, there we go, and that will just sit on there like that. Now on these instructions, remember what I said, they've got the little bunny ears symbol here. That's what this bunny ears symbol means. The bunny ears symbol means pay attention. That symbol is on the bottom, so the long, this gap here, so that bunny ears corresponds to the bottom bit, which means that bit goes there. And the same here, you've got just the shape and the symbols at the bottom, so make sure the gap at the bottom is big. That's how those bunny ear symbols work. Now this bit here, we're ignoring this in the instructions, because this is if you're doing the plastic part and not the actual photo etch part. Now I'm not going to attach the photo etch part, because the photo etch part is held in place down here with the plastic piece, but up here it's held in place with glue, and I don't want to do that because I need to take it all apart again. So yeah, we're not doing that just yet. So this is going to be the slowest build ever. How long have I been doing this now? 45 minutes or something? I don't know. Forever, this build. Now we do have some little greeble details. U1, which needs to go on. How's this go now? This goes like, it's very hard to see. Oh, there we go. It shows on the diagram. It goes on part U1. This is confusing. Part U1. This is the peg at the bottom, and this is the sort of like the almost like a distributor cap on the top. This image here corresponds to this bottom part, because I was looking at the top of it thinking it looks nothing like this, because it looks like, yeah, this is this bit here, this little white area is the bottom part, so it needs to go that way around. Right, that was confusing. So the little peg on the bottom has a little sort of T shape, so that goes in there. Let's get it in the tweezers. Now this is hard for me to do because it is on camera and the camera's in the way, so this is probably going to ping, and I'm going to have great fun with this. Let's see if we can do this on camera and not ping it across the carpet. Where does it go? It goes there. Yeah, so it's not just a circular hole, it's a circular hole with a little key. It's like a lock and key tab. There we go, get in, go on. No. This is where you'll have lots of fast forwarding now, because it's just going to task me, isn't it? Let's try without the tweezers. Unfortunately, this will be a lot of this build. Now I am thinking going forward a lot of this build may just be sort of time lapse, because when it comes to doing things like the main hull, it's going to be lots and lots of tiny little parts like these, and there's no way I can sit and let you suffer hours of that, given this is one part I'm trying to get on now, one single part, and I can't get it in. It gives me big clamp hands. Come on, in you go. Get in. Oh. You clearly need tiny hands for this. Yep. There we go. It's in. It's in. Right, now I am going to glue these in, because these are just little greebles. So a little touch of Tamiya extra thin on the inside. Done, and that's permanently fixed forever. It doesn't matter that I'm gluing these in now, because they're not critical. They're not going to get in the way of anything. I need a part W12, and I know you won't see this on camera, but part W12, there's two of them. They look just like, remember the original studio model was a lot of kit bash parts. This, if I had to say what it was, I would say that was a RCS thruster quad from something like an Apollo era spacecraft of some sort. And I think Bandai have done a fantastic job of reproducing. Maybe you can see it a bit better once it's in place. It's that little bit there. That little bit there. I don't know if it'll be in focus. That little bit. It's a quad thruster. It's a quad RCS array. And it looks fantastic. So I think that Bandai have done a fantastic job of, where's that gone? Fantastic job of recreating all the little greebles on there. That goes in there. Little touch of the glue. Yes, these are little tiny greebles. They're not getting in the way of anything. There's nothing else that needs to connect in before they're applied, so I can quite happily glue these on and knowing they'll never come off in transit. So that's that bit there. We have another W12 to put on. Now I didn't know this, but that little quad thruster, RCS thruster unit, there's two of them. One of them goes on the side of the cockpit, and I didn't know, but that the Falcon has an RCS thruster quad, where you'd expect there to be a thruster quad, because that's what those quad thrusters are for. It's little reaction control system thrusters. So it's quite nice that I never knew that was there. That's the beauty of these. Now I don't know whether it was added to the studio model to actually look like a thruster quad, or whether it was just added because it was cool looking and they put it on because it looked cool. I don't know. I'm going to glue that in place, but carefully what I'm actually going to do. Should I? I don't want to risk gluing anything that's underneath it. So I'm going to quickly take this apart. Give me 2 seconds, I'll get that apart. There you go. So I took it all apart, glued that on and put it all back together again. I just wanted to make sure that when I was putting glue on here, it wasn't running inside anywhere and gluing this outer hole to the inner cockpit thing. So I wanted just to make sure. Don't want to glue anything to anything anywhere that I don't need to go somewhere. Yes, so that's that on. We have this big doohickey here, which needs to go that way. This goes underneath, this goes under here, and I'm not going to glue it in though, because it does overlap ever so slightly the photo etch part, so I don't want to glue that in, because if I glue this in then I can't get the photo etch part in, which would be kind of stupid. So that's just going to sit there for a moment. I will have to, what I'll probably do is when I've finished this, I'll take it apart again and I'll put it in a bag with just the bits for the cockpit tube, for example, because I can't put the photo etch on until such time as I've, glued the, I can't put this on until I've glued the photo etch on, and I can't put the photo etch on until I've glued everything together and painted the interior. So yeah, so that's just going to sit on there. And then we have you U2. I hate U2. Can't stand U2. We have U2, which goes up here, goes in this little bit here. And again, this is one that holds the photo etch in, I think. Or it might not, I don't think, maybe don't think so, maybe it does. No, I don't think it does. That just sits on there. And then we have U21, which just sits in here, like that, filling that hole. Lovely. Again, I don't want to glue that in, because that's something I can glue in later. It's not a problem. There are some things that I won't need to glue in. I won't have to actually glue that in if I don't want to, but I can wait till the cockpit's installed, then I can glue it in and we can do all the painting. So, and then J20, which I will be able to glue in. J20 is that way around. J20 goes into these two little slots here and here. So that will sit there. I'm being very gentle with this because this is delicate time. The thin spindly tube, of which there are many on this kit. So that just sits on there. Now this can be glued in. Quickly touch the glue to it here. Just a tiny touch. And just a tiny touch. And the reason this is moulded as a separate piece is because you've got this little bar here that's got a gap underneath it, and it's a good way to increase the part count, because you've got this little rod that goes, this little bar goes across here. It's a good way to increase the part count, but also you couldn't really mould that gap very easily. It'd be quite tricky to get that moulded on with a gap underneath the tube. So I can understand why they've kept that as a separate part. And then this piece sits on here like that, and I think we can actually glue that on. That bit doesn't really matter, so we'll push this one down, spladooge, push it in all the way home, make sure it's in. Be careful of the greebles we just put on that. Now there is a bit of gap, but that might be intentional. There might be a bit of hole that lines up against this, so I'm not too stressed about it right now. But if it needs correction later on, I've got the option of taking it all apart again. So there you go. And it's not going to come out. That's permanent now. Right, so that's where we are so far. We've got little bits glued on. I'm not going to do the photo etch. I can see how it all goes together. I may have to do something with this. I don't know yet. We'll see. The cockpit, like I say, the cockpit canopy frame, that will naturally fill itself once it's glued in place and taped. It does mean that we're going to have to paint the interior of the canopy frame and then glue this in place and hope that the glue on the outside doesn't get into the inside and mess up the paint of the interior of the canopy frame. I'm sure it'll be fine. And what we'll have to do as well is paint the cockpit before we assemble all the hull around it and mask off. Basically, we'll paint the cockpit, we'll build this. I will then paint the interior of the canopy frame, let it dry, get it varnished, weathered and stuff with the cockpit. This will be placed on top. Well, there'll be masking tape put on the inside. This will be placed on top, glued in place. Everything can be sprayed because there'll be masking tape on the inside. Everything will be sprayed, the whole body will be sprayed, and then when it's finished you can simply push through with the masking tape and pull it out, and you'll have a perfectly painted cockpit that's not been covered up by the hull colour. That's the plan. That's the plan. Yeah, see, I'm used to the fine moulds one where you can just pull the cockpit nozzle, this bit of the cockpit off completely, and you can paint the inside, and it's a doddle to go together. This is a bit more tricky, so we'll have to do some planning and thinking. But that's going to do it for this episode. As I say, with this build going forward, a lot of it's going to be tiny parts that's pointless to me trying to film, because you'll be sitting there watching the top of my head. So a lot of it might be time-lapse stuff where I just say, right, now we're going to build a mandible, and I just build a mandible. And I might stop it every now and then to point something out important. But other than that, it might just be a bit of time-lapse stuff until it's all built, and then we can do proper filming of the painting and weathering, because that's where the majority of this is. It's really going to be about painting, weathering, and me pointing out a few bits here and there that you might need to know. But that's going to do us for now. So thank you very much for watching. Don't forget, as always, this has been filmed for emodels.co.uk, your one-stop shop for all your model making needs, my channel sponsors and supporters. So do go along to their website and check out. It's basically anything you need, they've got it. If they haven't got it, you don't need it. They'll have something equally as good, that is a good alternative that you can pick up instead. But yes, that's going to do us. So thank you very much for watching. Take care of yourselves. Go make something awesome. Go be awesome. And until next time, I shall say, adios, amoebas.